Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. If you're here for the Group TAM Plan update process. And today we'll be talking about the condition assessments of all the capital assets. We want to thank you for being very cooperative so far. We completed um, the first step of the process, which was collecting asset inventory. Although we're past the calendar dates, our data is not yet complete. But I'll begin this time with some introductions, and then we'll continue with this morning's program. I'd like to remind you to kindly uh, mute your microphone so that there isn't any feedback or background noise as we proceed. Again, my name is Stephanie Amwini Yangson. I'm a consultant working with GDOT on this Group TAM Plan update process. Today with me will be um, Lisa Rada from GDOT, Mariati Echeverry, and Scott Dunbar. I don't know if Lisa or Troy is on the call and would like to say anything.
All right. All right. Just drop the key off over here. I say drop it.
Stephanie, I think Lisa just joined.
Okay. Yes, Lisa, if you'd like to just say anything before we proceed.
That was my last.
I will do. Are y'all ready?
Uh,
Okay, I think there's no extra words from GDOT, so we'll go ahead and proceed at this time. So this morning, we'll be going through a very fixed agenda. We've completed the introductions. We'll go through the background of the TAM plan process, look at the where we are now with the asset inventory update, which you all participated in. We'll talk through the condition assessment process, and then we'll have a time of training, which will be for the how you're going to conduct the facility condition assessments, and that will be conducted by um, our colleague Scott Dunbar. And so, just as a reminder, this whole update process is part of the requirements from FTA as part of the asset management system improvement. It's to develop a compliant TAM plan, update the 2018 TAM plan. We also want to make sure that this time around, this process is very coordinated and collaborative, so that all of the agencies, GDOT agencies, feels a part of the process and understand the process. So our job is to help facilitate this too and coordinate to make sure that the TAM plan is um, ready and approved by the accountable executive of each agency by the October 1st deadline. And so the approach we've taken so far was a very first call was to have the kickoff meeting, you could call it, with the subrecipient. So we did the introduction of the TAM plan and outlined the responsibilities between the participants, the group participants, and GDOT's role. The next step was to carry out the asset inventory update. Now, with this, we provided the asset inventory training where we gave guidance on how to fill out the data collection tool we provided you. And so we've conducted a QA/QC of all the data we received. Of the data that we received, there were 35 organizations that we received data from. Of that, 26 of them had missing information. So we followed up with each one of you, and we received information from some agencies of the 26. So we received, I think 10 more, but there's still 16 agencies that we have incomplete data for. It's very important that we have a full and complete asset inventory, or else we will be unable to move on to the next stage, which is the condition assessment process. Uh, One thing to just to mention is that with the facilities especially, the follow-up, because we have the facility condition assessments coming up, we focus the follow-up purely on just facility data. That does not mean that all the vehicle data and equipment data received were complete. We've only focused efforts now on the facilities since we want to make sure that we're able to complete the condition assessments. And so there will be additional follow-up to fill in any missing data or data that we have questions about for your vehicles and for your equipment. And so again, until we have a complete list of the facilities to fill in the asset inventory, we are not able to proceed with the condition assessment. So we would appeal to everyone on the call to help us to move along with our timeline for this TAM update process. And so where we are now, this stage is the condition assessment. So today we'll be receiving the guidance on the condition assessment process. Following that, the subrecipients, which is all of you, would have sometime 3 weeks to conduct the assessment, including this week. And so once that is completed and all the data is submitted, AECOM and GDOT will go through and QA/QC the data and also finalize condition assessment for all the other asset categories. Once that is complete, we'll move to the investment prioritization step, which involves conducting the state of good repair analysis on all of the capital assets. We'll do this in collaboration with GDOT, and then use the information we develop to update the group TAM plan. So for the update process, each agency that is a participant will have a chance to review the draft and provide comments. And then once we receive those comments and revise the draft document, we'll send it back to you for approval. And what we'll need is just signatures from your accountable executive of accepting the final draft. So for the condition assessment, what you're looking at here is a summary of how we are going to assess condition for each type, each category of asset. For rolling stock, which is your revenue vehicles, we're going to use an age-based methodology, which is accepted by FTA. Many agencies may also conduct condition checks on their individual vehicles, but because this is such a broad assessment for all the agencies, in order to standardize it, we're going to use the age-based approach, which will focus on using the useful life benchmark. For equipment, which is your service vehicles, the non-revenue vehicles, those will also be age-based. For equipment, part of the asset inventory update information we requested was for the provision of only equipment that are that have value above $50,000. Many agencies provided all of their equipment, which is not what we need, but we'll filter through and list only the ones that have value over $50,000. Those will also be based on the useful life that was provided in the asset inventory. Now, if you provided information on a piece of equipment and didn't provide a useful life, there's something that we'll have to follow up with you as well. And that's why it's so important that the initial stage was done in the best way possible. Finally, where you participate directly is with the field assessments on your facilities to conduct the condition assessment. Some people ask questions about equipment that may be considered part of a facility. Those kinds of equipment that are considered part of the facility, meaning they cannot be moved from one location to another. It's bolted to the ground. It's considered as part of the facility. It can be assessed as part of your field assessment, meaning in the field assessment tool that you'll be using to conduct the condition assessment, there'll be a place where you can fill in information for equipment. So that's where this type of equipment will go. Any other type of equipment can be listed in your equipment inventory. I see there's a question in the chat. I'll go ahead and read it. It says, why don't you put that in the description? Equipment, service vehicles, 50K and above. John Logan, I don't understand your question. If you could unmute and clarify.
Okay, you said that the service vehicles on the last slide was 50K above. And I didn't know that, so we probably put, stuff in there lower than that.
No. So
Service vehicles are not?
No, so those are two. That's why they are listed separately. So
Okay.
for equipment, there's two types of equipment. There's service vehicles, and then there's other equipment. So for service vehicles, all service vehicles have to be listed,
Yeah.
regardless of price. So all your non-revenue vehicles, they're all
So
considered.
your service vehicles, if they're under 50K, you still want them, right?
Price is not a consideration. All service vehicles.
Thank you for clarifying.
No other criteria, yeah. But then when it comes to other equipment, meaning non-vehicle equipment, we only want you to list those that are above $50,000 in value. I hope that clarifies.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, all right. So for the condition assessment, as was stated before, if you're assessing other equipment, that's the equipment that are above $50,000, that we don't want you to double count. So we don't want it to be double counted in the inventory and then again in the facility condition assessment. If it's considered part of the building, is bolted to the ground, cannot be moved, assess it as part of the facility. But if it's not part of the building, then it can be a separate piece of equipment. Are there any questions on this? Okay, so I think the next important question is which facilities require condition assessment? This is a very important question, as we know that many of you may not have full transit facilities of your own. And so there's two criteria, only two, and source of funding is not one of them. A question we've been receiving a lot is, what if we didn't get funds from GDOT or federal funds? That doesn't matter. The source of funding is not a criteria. The only criteria are capital responsibility and incidental use. So what is capital responsibility? An agency has capital responsibility if you own the asset, so you own the facility, or you jointly own it with another authority or agency, or you're responsible, it may be third party owned, but then you're still responsible for replacement, overhaul, refurbishment, or major repairs. Or you have the cost of, even if you don't conduct it yourself, you have the cost of those activities in your capital budget as an itemized line item in your capital budget. What this does not look like is if you just have a single lease, like you don't do anything, all you do is just pay a lump sum, let's say $10 million at the end of the year. I don't know where your rent is, but that is not having capital responsibility. But if you have the cost of major repairs or upkeep of the facility as a capital line item, it means that you do have capital responsibility of that building, and therefore it should receive a condition assessment. The second criteria is whether the building, if there's capital responsibility, whether the building has greater than incidental transit use. Incidental transit use is if the space used for transit of the total space of the building is less than 50%. And so for maintenance and administrative facilities, when there's capital responsibility, you've already determined that there's capital responsibility, but then you want to decide, is there incidental use or is this greater than incidental use? Again, incidental use is if it's just less than 50%. And so if you just have one small room or one room in a huge, maybe city hall or town hall, comparing the size of the space used for transit versus the rest of the building, if it's less than 50%, then it does not meet the criteria for receiving a condition assessment, meaning you don't have that responsibility from the FTA. I hope that helps to clarify. But what we do need to keep in mind, though, is that all facilities used for the purpose of transit service must be listed in the asset inventory. All facilities used for transit purposes must be listed in the asset inventory, regardless of funding source. So it doesn't matter what source of funding was used to build the facility. As long as it's used for transit purposes, it should be listed, asset registered. Passenger stations, parking facilities, admin facilities, and exclusive use maintenance facilities that have capital responsibility. So a facility is considered exclusive use if it's not a commercial maintenance facility, where maybe you just take a commercial garage where you take certain vehicles to be used, or that it's not owned by the agency. So if it's exclusive use, it means it is not commercial, or it is owned by the transit agency, or is used for servicing their transit vehicles. So that's an exclusive use maintenance facility. In that case, we want you to conduct a condition assessment if there's capital responsibility.
There are a couple of questions of raised hands. Stephanie, if you want
Yes.
to.
Oh, yes. John Logan, I think your hand is raised again.
Yes, ma'am. We're a Walker County government, and where our transit is located is right next door to the fleet maintenance building, and they do all our oil changes, tire changes, anything that needs to be serviced on the vehicles, repaired, they do that. So do I include their building because they service our vehicles? And also we have a fuel island that we buy our own fuel, or the county buys its own fuel. Do I count it as well?
So let me make sure I understand your question. You have a fuel island and a maintenance building, but it is owned by the county.
That is correct. And you know, we're a Walker County Public Transit. We're part of that agency, I guess, that umbrella agency. So that's where I was kind of confused on, you know, where do I draw the line? And I guess when I was doing the first TAM inventory, I drew the line at, you know, GDOT funding. And I guess I shouldn't have done that by hearing some of this.
Yes, so it sounds like it's either because you are the one reporting to FTA, you would have to do it. So there has to be a condition assessment. If it's for jointly owned facilities, there has to be a condition assessment, but the two owners would have to agree. But if the county is not the one that reports directly to FTA, then it should be the agency, either you or the county. But because it's used to service your transit vehicles, and it's not a commercial facility, it's owned by the county, so it's
Correct.
used to service county vehicles and your transit vehicles. It's not a commercial facility where other people come in. So then you should include a condition assessment for that garage, as well as the island, the fuel island.
Thank you.
Xenia,
Yes, hi. I know that a lot of my transits have been calling because of trying to understand what it is that is required, because I have a majority of them that run out of the senior center, in which they only have an office that they run transit out of. They don't own the senior center. That is everything, county related. So they were wondering, well, why am I declaring this part? And when it comes to the square footage, do they just report the square footage that's in the office that they run transit out of, or the whole facility of the senior center? And then the other aspect was a lot of them get the fuel from their county depot, where they go and, the county has a fuel station, and they go, as all of the county fleet vehicles go to get gas there. So are they to include that, since they're only using their part of the transit to go get fuel, but the whole county also uses that fuel station to get fuel?
Thank you very much, Zenia. So I think the previous slides that we went over answer your first question about which building should be included. So there's two separate things here. There's the asset registry that we need to fill out, which is a registry of all the assets that are used for providing public transportation. When it comes to facilities, we want a list of all the facilities that are used for provision of public transportation. There's no criteria, whether it's third party owned or owned by the agency, whether there's direct capital responsibility or not. We just want the listing. When it comes to performing a condition assessment, that's where these two criteria come in. And so this answers your question: capital responsibility and whether the space is used for greater than incidental use. For your third question about the fuel station, the fuel island, it's not owned by the agency, but it's owned by the county. And all the county vehicles get their fuel from that facility. Is the agency a part of the county, or is it a separate agency? Is it a division of the county? Is the county the recipient of funds from GDOT? Is it the county that runs the agency? I guess is my question.
Well, the county, the grant funds is given to the county, who designates it to transit only. So yeah, the grant goes through the county for transit.
Yeah, okay. And so does the transit agency, any of the funds for the transit agency designated for repairs of that building, of that station, is there
No,
sort of capital responsibility?
the only thing that the transit charges the grant funds is just the fuel, getting the fuel cost, not actually maintaining or anything like that.
Okay. So then they will not be included in the condition assessment, but it should still be listed in the inventory because it's needed for the provision of public transportation. Does that clarify? So when it comes to the asset inventory, we want everything just to have a good idea of the listing, because all you need is it's just a listing of the assets that are used for provision of public transportation. The next step, when we are considering condition and performance, and that next step, that next level is where we start to look a little bit more into detail about, oh, what is this facility? Like what percentage of the space is used for transit versus other uses? Is it just incidental? Do they have capital responsibility, etc.? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And a lot of them that are on now, at least they'll have a more definitive answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roy?
Hey, Stephanie, real quick. To answer the second question, we need both.
We need both the square footage that your people are occupying plus the square footage of the entire building.
Hi, yes, so I'm a little confused now because the first question, he had a garage, the county garage where his vehicles are being serviced, but they also service all the other vehicles in the county. And you said that building needs an assessment. But then on the other stuff, you said because they don't need it. So,
It's the
In-
fuel
in-
station. It's a fuel
right.
station.
So-
So for maintenance, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so for a maintenance garage, we have our vehicles, we're a county agency. The county has a garage. We don't pay any of the maintenance of the garage out of our funds. And we're less than 50% of incidental use. So would that mean we do not need to do an assessment of the garage?
So the question is, the use of the maintenance garage is less than 50%
By the transit agency.
by the transit agency, but it is still considered exclusive use, right? Because no, it's not commercial.
It's not commercial, it's used solely by all the vehicles of the county.
Yes, so it needs a condition assessment, whether by the county or by the agency, but it still needs to be reported. It still needs a condition assessment.
Okay,
So for your admin buildings, for your maintenance garage, if it's not a commercial building, where there's capital responsibility, then include it. But then if there isn't, then if there's no capital responsibility, then no. And like we said before, capital responsibility is you own it or you jointly own it with another authority. If it's jointly owned, then it needs to be decided which entity will conduct the assessment, but the condition assessment is still needed. Or there's a capital item there's a line item in your capital budget for repair, replacement, refurbishment, or major repairs of that facility.
Hey, Stephanie, so we don't get bogged down on, which facilities we're pulling out. I mean, I think right now we need the full asset inventory, right? And then you're going to follow up with the various PMs as to which buildings will actually get a condition assessment. So, we don't have to probably dig too deep into the weeds on that right now.
Teddy Bowling, you have a question? Teddy, you have a question? Okay. If you don't have any question, I think we can move forward. But
I think he put the question in the chat box.
Yeah, I think his question is the field for building square foot. He's saying, is there a way to amend that to include both the square footage for their space plus the entire building?
yes. We'll follow up with. Okay. Thank you very much. And so, like we said, priority right now is to have the asset inventory, a full, complete asset inventory. And after our QA/QC, there's a lot of missing information that we are working to follow up with you on. And so, if we can have that settled, then we can move on to the next stage. Corey, if you could type up your question in the chat box, that would be great. Okay. So after this, now I'm going to hand over to Scott and his colleague to take us through the condition assessment training. But I'll take one more question. Teddy, if Teddy still has a question, you can ask it. Else, we'll move on to the next step of this meeting. Okay, Scott, whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right, so if you're driving, Stephanie, we'll just go through the slides pretty quickly here. It just outlays the, the process, but I think it's going to be most valuable to get Marcus to share his screen and they can actually see the application and work and see what they're actually going to do in the field. So you can move forward with the next slide. All right, again, this is what you each will, I think you've each been sent this sheet. The QR code there is what you're going to scan. You'll see Marcus scan the QR code and it'll bring up, once you've downloaded the ArcGIS Survey123 application, which is available on any, Google Play Store, Apple iPhone Store, or whatever it's called. You download it on your device, either a phone or a tablet, whatever you want to use to conduct your assessment. You'll scan the QR code. It'll bring up the specific GDOT survey, which you'll want to use for collecting data. You can move forward. And we don't have to get too deep into this. We'll see this when Marcus does his demo, so we can go forward. This we've kind of already done. We're in the process, at least, of identifying each of the facilities that need to be assessed. Again, each facility is going to need to be assessed separately. So hopefully that's how you filled out your information in the Excel sheet. You can go forward. We've already done this process. Well, I guess we're in the process of generating QR codes for each facility. So when you do a facility, you'll scan a QR code that we give you, and then that QR code is just for that one facility. Once you switch to your second facility, if you have more than one, you'll scan a new QR code and start all over. You can go forward. This is somewhat important. This is the level of information that you're going to be collecting. So, there's various levels in the hierarchy for FTA. What you see on the left-hand side is the full hierarchy, A through H. And then you're going to be collecting information at the level 3. So when you get to something like, basement walls or, basement excavation, you'll give a rating for that in total. So some of these things are going to be like, electrical distribution, for example. You don't have to see every single panel. We're trying not to bog you down in the field, but it's a general rating for that particular level 3 component. Next slide. And for each thing that you rate, you're not going to say, oh, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You're going to answer these 4 basic questions. You're going to answer a question about the asset's age. It's going to fit into one of these categories here. You won't even see the 5 through 0. It'll just say, the asset's new, or the asset's at its midpoint, or it's past its midpoint. You make that judgment. You'll go on to asset condition. You'll make another judgment. You'll pick from these 5 options for that one. For asset performance, again, you'll pick from these 5 options. And then lastly, for level of maintenance, you'll pick from those 5 options. And once you've picked those for each of these categories, we'll generate a score. And then that'll be the score for that particular subcomponent. You can go forward. GDOT has asked that you guys be involved in this process. So you guys will be in the field collecting the information, taking photos. And GDOT has also asked that identify deficiencies to kind of justify your rating instead of just saying, we think this asset's bad. Well, they want to know, why is it bad? you know, what's actually wrong with it. Next slide. We just talked about you'll go through and identify any deficiencies. You know, you shouldn't have something rated at like a 5 and then say, you know, there's 3 deficiencies on it. You know, that's the type of thing I think people will be looking for, and the type of thing we want to catch on the back end. So maybe you rated it wrong, or maybe, you know, there's some misunderstanding, something like that. But, you know, generally your rating should be consistent. If there's a deficiency, you know, it should look like the rating should play that out. You're going to take photographs. At least one photograph of each system would be ideal. You also want to take at least one photograph of each deficiency. And, you know, the deficiency stuff we'll get to in the upcoming slides here. We can move forward. So each deficiency is going to have a priority as to when you think it needs to be handled. This is critical because we're trying to prioritize, I guess, the way that they're going to invest in these deficiencies. So if you say it's something that doesn't need to happen for, you know, 5 years, then obviously you don't need money now. But if you say it's a priority 1 deficiency, you know, then we know it's something that at least priority wise is at the top of the food chain. Next slide. This also plays into, I'm sorry, can you go back one? There you go. Plays into the prioritization of your deficiencies. You know, you're going to pick one of these 5 categories. You're going to say it's a deficiency because it's life safety, you know, replace a sprinkler head, replace a generator, or, you know, the you know, fire pump's not working, or whatever, the fire alarm system's not working. Operational impact would be something that directly impacts the ability of the building to operate. You know, the air conditioning system's not working. System dependence is, you know, if we don't fix this system, it has the ability to impact another system. That's critical. Life cycle is exactly what it sounds like. It's something that just needs to be replaced because it's old. And then aesthetic are those things that are, I guess, less important, a little less superficial. You got to repaint the walls or a patch of drywall or something like that. That's not going to stop the operation from going forward. Next slide. And quickly, this is just a risk matrix. It takes into account the priorities that you select along with the risk factors. And we know if something is a life safety and it's a priority 1, that's the red flashing light. Like, we need to do something urgently. And something that's aesthetic and it's a priority 4, obviously there's very little priority on that. There's very little risk on that. This is our analysis. We take those ratings that you've given us at the level 3 that we saw, and then we aggregate those up based on a series of weights and factors. And eventually we'll get to a full building rating. And then we'll be able to compare the portfolio across the entire state, compare your portfolio for your agency. If you have more than 1 facility, we can kind of see what the better performing buildings are, what the poor performing buildings are, and so forth. And ultimately, we will put together a dashboard for all of this work that will look similar to this. I don't know who's going to have access, but you know, the state will be able to go in there and see the full portfolio, see some graphics, you know, which ratings are higher and so forth, see all the different surveys that have been submitted. You know, they can map everything out and so forth. Next slide. Also, as a deliverable will be a state of good repair report, which will include every single asset that you gave a rating for, as well as those ratings that are being aggregated at the different levels. You'll get a full look at everything, as well as the deficiencies. You see at that box at the bottom on the left-hand side, it's your deficiencies. Ideally, you would have photos in there. And then on the right-hand side, you see the ratings for each system, along with the replacement value and then the overall rating there. Generally, we say anything less than a 3, we tend to call a in not good repair. And that means that, you know, some work is needed. Anything higher than a 3, we would say would be in a state of good repair, which is the ultimate goal of what we're doing. Next slide. All right, so if we could, Stephanie, I want to just turn it over to Marcus real quick and let him run through what the actual survey looks like when you're in the field and you've got a device in your hand and you're trying to do this work. What the application generally looks like.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'll go ahead and move forward. I know that there are several questions in the chat, but we'll circle back to that here in just a moment. Let me join in on my mobile device here. And then I will show you the application. Okay, hopefully everyone is seeing my my screen.
We do.
Yes, loading.
Okay, good. Okay, so let me get out of that. So the first thing that we will do, obviously, is that you will need to download. And I apologize, I've got my personal and business all mixed together on one phone. So the first thing that we'll download is, as Scott mentioned, is you want to download the Survey123 app. So we'll go ahead and open that up. And as you can see, I've got some surveys on here, but I don't have the GDOT survey specifically. So as the instructions say on your training document, up in the top right corner, you see a little QR code icon. You tap that, and then you can scan that QR code in your training document, and that will download the application itself. And there we go. Now, the next thing, obviously, is that you'll need to select a building, a handout. I'm guessing, Scott, a handout will be given to everybody, or some sort of document will be given to everyone that has the QR codes for each individual office or building, or
Right.
you know, the right. So on the application itself, you see that little barcode identifier. You can just tap that, and once again, you'll just scan the QR code for the site. And there you can see that it pulls up all of the site information. You've got administrative office, sales office, you've got the address, and then you will enter in your email address. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in my AECOM. Done. And then we want to accept the terms and services. And now you can see I've got 2 pages available. Navigation on the application is very, very simple. Most of your navigation is going to take place down at the bottom of the screen. So I can, hit the next button there to take it to the next page, which is our hazard analysis. We want to do this at every site. It'll automatically fill in the date and time. And then in order to choose the location that you're at, you can just hit the little crosshairs there, and it'll automatically pull up the map and put a pin there. Now, if you need to move that pin, so for example, if you're waiting in a parking lot, as an example, before you're going into the building itself, you can always just tap right on the map there, and you can move this pin around to make it a little bit more precise as to where the actual building that you're making the assessment is at. And then we'll just hit that check mark, and then it resets that pin for you. And then for all of the task hazard analysis pieces, we'll make sure that we want to fill all of these in. Everything that's listed with like if you see here that stairs risk and there's a red asterisk next to it, that means that it's required. And you'll see that throughout the entire application. If it's got a red asterisk next to it, that is a required field, and data is is needed there in order to proceed. And I'm just randomly filling this out here. And then of course you can add in any notes. And hopefully spell it correctly. And then of course you can take a photo or download a photo as is necessary for the hazard analysis itself, and then you can accept and confirm that everything there is accurate. And once again, once I hit accept, you notice on the bottom of my screen that now I'm at 2 of 3. We can hit the arrow and go to the next page. Now this is where you can take a photo, or again download a photo if you already have one, of the building itself. So we'll go ahead and tap that, and we'll just
real quick, Mark, you have to take that photo. So just take a general photo of the actual building you're in. It just helps for bookkeeping purposes as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, to Scott's point, notice that it does have that red asterisk next to it as well. And then of course, you can take that general photo. The next piece is the floor plan. So if there is another photo that you'd like to take, or if there is a document that you have for the floor plan, you can. Oops, sorry about that. You can enter that in here under floor plans, and that little pencil icon there, that actually allows you to do markup on that image as well. So if you needed to place a pin for a specific, if there's like a specific deficiency, or if there's a specific floor that you're looking at, or room that you're assessing, you can put a pin there. You can write a note on the image. It's actually kind of cool.
For this level of assessment, we won't need a floor plan.
Okay. So for the meat and potatoes of what you're all going to be doing here, this is where the asset classification comes in. So whenever you're doing a new asset, you'll hit that plus button. And then, of course, you've got our classification levels, which Scott went over in his slides. We're looking for at least level 3. So I do see a quick question: if this app can be installed on a computer. The answer is no, it cannot. It needs to be handled through a mobile device, whether that be a phone or a tablet, because it's a mobile application itself. So it needs to be. You're going to be walking around the building, taking photos, entering in deficiencies, logging assets. So you're going to be in the field doing that. So it is rated for a mobile device. As far as how you obtain, that's
for the people asking about getting a phone, if you don't have a phone, we can try to put together a paper form. It's going to create some challenges, but we'll work with the GDOT folks to get you a paper form, and we have to figure out how you're going to incorporate your photos and everything else.
Mm-hmm. So. Sorry, I didn't mean to break the flow. It was a question that had come up multiple times, so thought it might be good to go ahead and get that answered. But back to the classification review. As Scott mentioned, we're looking to get up to classification level 3. And it is a smart dropdown, or a smart cascading dropdown. So, for example, if we choose substructure, your level 2 is already limited to what's available for substructure. So then we'll do, basement, or actually we'll do foundations. And then of course, level 3 is set to those foundation options. We'll just do standard foundation. Scott, question for you. Level 4 and level 5 are optional within the application.
We won't need it. Won't need it at all.
Okay, so we'll be skipping level 4 and level 5. We'll just be sticking with level 3. And then, of course, once you fill that in, then you can enter in the asset level details. And so right now we've got, let's see here. So you can, if there's a barcode available for that asset, you can tap that scanner to take that barcode. Okay. Okay. Then we can get with Mark to have that removed. You can enter in a name for that. We'll just put flooring just to keep it simple. And then you can enter in a floor depending on you know, and
All of this goes, Marcus, all of this goes away because we're just doing this at an asset level building wide. So we won't need this
Okay.
type of locational information.
okay,
All this location information goes away.
okay. In which case, then I'll just tap all this in there just to have it. We've already got the map location. You can enter in your quantity, but it sounds like all of this is going away.
All of that whole table goes away.
Okay. And then we'll go ahead and jump down to condition rating. So for condition rating, these are the items that Scott mentioned also. You've got your years of useful life remaining, your asset age, asset condition, asset performance, and level of maintenance. Obviously, useful life remaining, we can say it's got 5 years remaining. Asset age, and notice that these values correlate with what Scott mentioned in his slide. We'll go ahead and say that asset nearing its midlife point. Condition, asset showing minimal signs. Performance, asset generally meets performance, level of maintenance, some temporary deferments. Now, if you need to add a deficiency, you can hit yes, and then you can enter in your deficiency items here. And again, these issues, or these top areas here, where it's like room number, cafeteria, and all that, you won't need to worry about that. And then you can tap there to get the location of the deficiency. And then, of course, what type of deficiency? Sorry. What type of deficiency? We'll say buckling, medium, risk factor, operational impact, quantity in square feet. We'll say 10 square feet. And then percent deficient, we'll say
We won't need that. We'll get rid of that, and we'll get
okay.
rid of unit costs.
Okay. And then, of course, for any additional comments here, you can add in some, human readable comments. Flooring is buckling. And then you can take a photo of that deficiency, where you would actually take a photo of like cracked flooring, or buckling in the wall, or whatever that deficiency is. Now, before we get any further, I do want to take note that you need to be very careful, or pay attention to the level at which you are adding. So if you needed to add a new deficiency, right, you're still at the same asset, but you needed to add a new deficiency, you would hit that top line plus sign, right? Because that's within the deficiency box. If you needed to add a new piece of equipment, that would be in the middle inside that yellow box. If you needed to add a new asset, that would be on the very bottom, in the gray box there. We've added in some text above that, so please be sure that you're adding in, new assets, equipment, or deficiencies at the correct level, because we don't want to, for example, we don't want people accidentally adding in new assets within the equipment piece, for example, where we're just adding in a bunch of equipment even though it ties to a completely different asset. So make sure that you're adding and deleting from the correct level. Otherwise,
And I gotta get with you and Marcus. We may get rid of the middle plus because we're doing these things system wide. You're not going to have two of the same system.
okay, yeah, we can meet to discuss. That's not a problem. But yeah, once you have all of that information filled out, you've got all of your pieces of equipment, assets, and any deficiencies logged. Then at the bottom of the screen, there's that little check mark. You'll just hit that, and now it's telling me, you've got a required field that you can't move forward. This is what I was telling you. Any required fields that don't get filled out, it'll tell you you've got to fill this out. So we'll just put in 2, 3, 4, 5, just to clear that, get the keyboard out of the way, and then we'll hit the check mark. Oy vey. There you go, 5 square feet. And as Scott mentioned, these items will be going away. Year installed, we'll say 1980. That's when I was born. I think it's a good year. And we'll call it $50. And then we hit the check mark. and less than critical. Okay, and now that all the required fields are filled out, now I can, it says survey complete. I can send it now, which will automatically send it off to the web services and be picked up for analysis QA QC. Now, if you need to save it and come back to it later, you can hit continue this survey. In which case it'll just kind of save it onto your device, and then you can come back to it later and do any kind of finishing touches that you need to do. Or you can save in your outbox, which means you can't really make any changes, but it saves it ready to be sent. Now you can say either of the bottom two options are acceptable. For example, if you're in an area where you don't have Wi-Fi or cell signal, you can save it to your device, and once you're into once you're back in the office or back in an area where you do have either Wi-Fi or a cell signal, you can then hit like continue the survey, and you can hit send, or you can go to your outbox within the application and hit send from there. So there's no reason to skip taking any information down or anything just because there's no signal, because it will save to your device locally, and then you can send it once you have that signal back.
On that point, Marcus, I think it's important for everybody to know, once your survey is loaded, once you've downloaded the survey and you have it on your device, you do not need Wi-Fi or cell service to do this to do the survey.
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. Now, kind of along those lines, though, is Scott is absolutely correct. You don't need cell signal or Wi-Fi in order to start the survey, but you do need that signal in order to download the survey. So if you recall, in that first step, I scanned the QR code, and that added that survey to the application itself. You do have to have Wi-Fi and cell signal in order to download that. So have everything downloaded and ready to go before you go out into the office, just in case, or out to the field, sorry, just in case. But yeah, once you have all that downloaded and you go out, you can go out to the field, you can do the entire survey, save it to your device, and then send it once you're back in the in a signal area. Absolutely. Since this is all garbage data, obviously I don't want to send that. But yeah, that should finish that up. Scott, are there any other items on this that you'd like me to cover before I stop sharing my my screen?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we're going to definitely simplify the application for this particular use. It does there's a lot in there that you guys won't need to worry about. We want to make it as simple as possible. The biggest thing is just going, stepping down and covering each of the systems in your building. So it's going A, B, C, D, E, and so forth. If you have that system, you need to provide a rating on it. If you don't have that system, just skip it. You don't have to do anything for it. And obviously take your photos. You're allowed to take multiple photos if you feel like you need to. If you want to just take one and keep it moving, that's certainly understandable, acceptable. Same for the deficiencies. You'll take one photo at least to try to tell the story you want to tell and keep it moving. To do a building, once you kind of get the hang of it, it shouldn't take you more than an hour to do a building, depending on how complex or big the building is.
Cool. All right. Well, let me stop sharing my screen, and then
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw it back to Stephanie to close out.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I'd like to ask if there are any questions at this time for Marcus.
I think we covered the ones about the computer. The folks that don't have phones, again, we'll have to figure out another process for them. I'm not understanding the ones about the facility money or evacuations during severe storms. I don't know how that impacts the condition scores. If you guys want to chime in, please do.
Okay, let me make sure I understand the question. If if you're able to unmute and ask your question, that is also okay. So it says, what if we have to evacuate during severe storm in a construction trade at its end life? John, does it mean that you're currently working out of a trailer? You don't have a building?
That is
Because
correct.
there was
It's a construction trailer, which we've had to do roof repairs several times. The roof has been leaking. The walls are separating from the trailer due to mold. We're slotted to try to get a building built, but you know, how do I rate that as far as life safety? I mean, it's day to day. On a pretty day, you're okay, but anytime we have severe weather, we have to take mobile devices and move up to a secure building. So that, I guess that's what I'm just, when I go through the process of this, how do you rate that?
Okay, so your question is, you're not in a typical building. It's more of a trailer, so it doesn't have many of the levels, the asset levels, correct?
It has high vac. It has it's hooked up to power support, of course. So it does have heating and cooling. You know, we have water, bathrooms in it. So I mean, everything in it is like you would use day to day, but it's just not a. I mean, if we're having high winds or tornado warnings, we move, we leave.
Mm. Well, that's the facility you're working out of, and so that is your permanent location, right?
Yeah, it is.
So
I mean, we've done
have
these
it
on
in
other
place.
trailers for other agencies. It's not a new thing. I mean, the process is the same.
Okay.
Oh,
So the
okay, thank you.
All right. So there's another question from Rebecca Stevens that says, we have had our tax assessors do an assessment of our building in our county shop. Can we use this information to do our survey? Scott?
I would say probably not. I don't know what that assessor report is, but it's probably not broken down in the way we would need it. And then I'm sure GDOT wants your inputs on the conditions of your buildings. So I would think they would want you to go through with this process. But again, that's a GDOT call.
So what I would say, Rebecca, is to review the condition assessment. And if there's anything in the condition assessment that was provided that you can use in the survey, definitely include it in that. But we do need your data to be collected in the standard process. So for example, the assessment that was done on your building by your tax assessors identified certain deficiencies. Maybe there was a deficiency in the roof or some electrical system failure. Review those assessments and include that information in the assessment that you conduct. Can this app be installed on our computers? So that was already addressed. Because this is for a field survey, it'll be very difficult to walk around with your computer. And this is a mobile app, so it needs to be downloaded on a mobile device. So it could be a tablet or a cell phone. How do we obtain said phone? So this can be downloaded on any phone that you can download apps on and take pictures. And so we are hoping that almost everyone has a smartphone. But if you do not have a smartphone where you're able to download applications per se, let's say the version of your phone doesn't allow you to download apps, then you would have to go through the same process with a paper form. And so what we will do is send you through, if the PMs of those agencies who do not have smartphones, we will make it available and send it out through the PMs. We'll just make a paper form available that we'll send to PMs to be distributed. and then you can conduct a survey that way. Once we get the app, can there be another training session? This is a question for Scott and for GDOT. What would be the purpose of the second training? Weldon, Dudley? Weldon?
Yeah, I mean, just short of him chiming in here, I would just say if there are specific questions, feel free to email us. You know, if you're having trouble with something, you know, you email us. We're pretty responsive. We try to help you out. The presentation will be available via recording too. So if you need to go back and rewatch it, I think that's an option as well.
Yes. Yeah. So rather than have another training, this session was all recorded and will be put on the GDOT website. Again, if you download the app and you have any questions, like Scott said, you can email us and we'll be prompt to respond. If there's no GDOT money going into the building that we are using, do we have to do a field assessment? So this question has been handled a dozen times, but I'll say once you review the slides, you'll get the answer. If this is our building for county condition of our shop, even though we use the shop to provide oil changes and repairs, it should be brought to our county commission. Teddy Bowling, if you could, I'm having difficulty understanding your question. If you could unmute and ask your question clearly, that would be great. Teddy Bowling, unless you're having a microphone issue. So you're saying, I'm not understanding why this, oh, okay. I'm not understanding why you need this information because GDOT funds were not used. So this is a federal requirement and it's not GDOT's decision. It's a federal requirement that there's a listing of all assets used to provide transit service.
You followed up, so he doesn't understand why they have to provide all this information. I think you just answered that though. It's required by the FTA.
It's a federal requirement. And there's a lot of information on the FTA website for transit asset management. And so I would direct you to that website. And as you read the background, I believe you'll understand why they want to track this information. The purpose behind transit asset management and the reasoning behind having an asset inventory. So there's a lot of background information on why this final ruling was developed the way it was. And so I believe that once you read that, you'll understand the idea behind the performance management system that has been being implemented nationally. This is not starting this year. This has been since 2018.
Well, I think the difference is, Stephanie, I mean, there was another process, obviously, that they did for the last TAM plan, but GDOT leadership decided this time around they wanted subrecipients to be involved in this process.
So this has been since 2018, when the first TAM plan came around. Yeah. And so please, I would say that Teddy, please review this training again once it's posted, and once you do that, you'll go through the slides where we talked about which buildings need a condition assessment and which buildings only need to be listed in the inventory. I think that will clarify your questions as well, because we've gone over this. Once completed, will we be able to keep a copy of the assessment? So once completed, it goes into a database for the analysis, and there'll be reports developed for GDOT. And so I believe this will be a question for GDOT of how they will make their reports available to you. I believe I've covered all the questions. Were there any other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you again so much for joining this time. We are very glad that you're participating actively in this process. These assessments are due May 13th. Friday, May 13th is the drop dead date. And so please, before then, the earlier you start, the better, so that we can address any questions you have or any issues you may be having with the app or with downloading or inputting data. So kindly do that, as well as we'll have our colleague Mark follow up with PMs. Your PMs will be following up with you on any missing data. Remember, if we don't have the correct data, we're not able to set up those individual QR codes, which is needed for you to go into the field. So please provide that information as soon as possible. We asked that all of that was to be submitted yesterday by close of business, but please by at least tomorrow, Friday, let's have all the inventory information for facilities at least. We'll follow up with the vehicles later, but let's have the facilities at least so that Mark, Scott, and their team can develop the QR codes so that you can go into the field and start the assessment. John Logan?
Yes, you gave us a deadline on May, I think 14th, but I understand during the training, there's some issues that they got to remodify the app. So when is the app going to be remodified and able to start? I mean, I can start tomorrow, but I know the app's not ready and we don't have the QR code that's been sent to us to start this process. So I just don't want to have that coming down on May 11th.
No, it will not. The May 13th deadline is hard and it will not be moved. The reason we do not have QR codes now is because we don't have the complete asset inventory. And that's why we are asking that by tomorrow, please, if there's any follow-up that has been requested, please submit all the information so that the QR codes can be developed and sent out. So it's dependent on you. Let me put it that way. Marcus, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just around the fixes to the application. You're right, there are some changes that we'll need to make, but we'll be looking to have those available early next week for you all. I know that's not tomorrow. As you mentioned, you could go out tomorrow, but we'll try to get that available to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest holdup has been getting all of the information from the initial asset inventory. So once we have all of that information, we can go ahead and start with the QR codes.
Do we submit this information by email or will we get it off our submission? What information, please, Courtney Griffin? What information are you referring to?
The inventory lists themselves, you're going to get them off of the TAM inventory plans we've already submitted, and you are only specifying if we've gotten some feedback that it was incomplete, that you need additional information, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you've had any follow-up about incomplete information, please provide that info to your PM so that we can receive it.
A question here from Kimberly. We have forms already for other projects that we've used. I'm sure we can have something prepared by next week. One other consideration though is you're going to have to take photographs and then you're going to need to kind of tie your photographs to each asset so that, like if you submit to us, 30 photographs, we're not going to know which goes where. So we'll need to figure out a process for that.
Yeah, so for those that need to use paper forms, we would ask that before submitting your photos, you'd have to label them individually in your on your computer. You'd have to label the photos so that we know which assets they're tied to. Else, it'll be very difficult. And that's why the mobile device is useful because you're already entering information on the asset you're taking the picture from. But we understand that not everyone has a mobile device. And so we'll make the paper forms available early next week at the same time when the app is available. But again, we just need to make sure that the follow-up is complete so that we can proceed. So please be responsive to your PMs as well. Are there any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, please keep in mind tomorrow, April 22nd is a drop dead date. Please send all your inventory information. We will follow up then with the PMs to fill out or to decide which of your buildings will receive condition assessments. Once we have that, the QR codes can be developed and then you can go out into the field and conduct the assessment. To make sure that we keep to our time, we'll have this due May 13th, Friday, May 13th, so that we can continue with the investment prioritization and the rest of the TAM plan process. Thank you all very much for your collaboration during this process. I think this is an improved process, and we're very glad that you're participating in this way. If you have any questions, please feel free to email any one of us. Please copy everyone when you do, just so that we make sure that none of the questions fall through the cracks. Also, what would be more streamlined is if you send your questions to your PMs directly for them to follow up with us. That way, it will be more streamlined, but definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you. Thank you all very much, and we wish you a very good weekend.